time now for us to launch ourselves into today's agenda. So the IEA is alarmed at the current rate of government borrowing, and they have warned that Ghana is retrogressing to 1985, a painful period of near economic collapse. In a statement chronicling a short history of poor fiscal discipline, the IEA said, should we continue on this path, our national debt will grow to about 70% of GDP by 2016 and close to 100% by 2020, returning our nation to where it was some 30 years ago at the brink of financial collapse. That is not the Vision 2020 that anybody imagined we'd be heading towards. Now, former President Rawlings presided over a painful period of IMF intervention during which many people lost their jobs. The IEA is recommending the passage of a new law to force government to make sound financial decisions. Simple. We vote people into power to make sound financial decisions, but we have to enjoin them by law to do the same. Today we're going to be discussing that, and joining us is somebody who last week made some very interesting comments about his views of the future of Ghana's economy. Ken Thompson, CEO of Dalex Finance and Leasing Company, joins us in the studio. On the phones, we'll be speaking to Dr. John Kwakye. He's a senior economist at IEA. Hello and good morning, Dr. Kwakye. And also Dr. Mark Isibeyabwa, Member of Parliament for the New Jabin South constituency, a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament, and also a member of the New Patriotic Party. And we'll be speaking to them all. But Ken, I want to start with you. Before we get into this issue, you have already spoken about debt and the problem that it is for our nation last week. But the Finance Ministry came back and said, well, you haven't really considered the policies that they have put in place to ensure that all of your doom and gloom doesn't come to pass.
Thank you. All I did was to apply common sense to information available. I'm not an economist. And I don't want to get into an argument with the finance minister, but I'd like to make a humble submission. You earn 1,000 cedis. Mr. Yankson, think about it yourself. You earn 1,000 cedis. You have a lavish lifestyle. You spend 450 cedis on domestic servants. You spend 300 cedis on interest payments on projects that will mature maybe in 30 years' time. You don't live with your children. Your children sleep in darkness. When your children go to school, to the hospital, they won't be looked after because you're not paying your hospital bills. And your children are being sacked from school. Mr. Yankson, maybe you need a policy rethink. I mean, for me, it's, I'm not an economist, but maybe I'm totally wrong. And maybe I'm stupid. Somebody should say, Mr. Thompson, what you're saying is stupid. But you earn 1,000 cedis. You spend 450 on domestic servants. You spend another 300 cedis on interest. Okay. You do not live with your children. Your children sleep in darkness. When your children go to the hospital, they are not looked after because the bills have not been paid. When they go to school, they are sacked because of no school fees. It's like running a business. So you borrow maybe 100,000 cedis. You invest in a real estate project, which probably will mature in about 10 years' time. And suddenly, you have no money for working capital to continue the business, and you collapse. And for me, that is the simple analogy that I would like everybody to understand. It's a very simple analogy.
Well, we're going to be talking about borrowing in a very short while, and interrogating your thoughts a bit further. But I'm conscious of Dr. John Kwakye's limited time. Now, he's a senior economist at IEA. They're the ones who have released this theory or this warning to the government that our borrowing is going to spiral out of control. Dr. Kwakye, this prediction is scary. Nobody wants 1983 all over again. But there are those who are saying that, well, you've made this prediction without factoring in what the government is doing about borrowing. They put a moratorium on it, and then they also said that from now on, borrowing will only be for projects that can pay. for the loans that they're taking? Are these not steps in the right direction which will prevent the prediction that you've made?
Yes, to me, I didn't really say that.
Hello? Oh, that is not a good line. Let's see if we can re-establish contact with Dr. John Kwakye and get his thoughts on this issue. But in the meantime, the problem with anybody who speaks in criticism of government's efforts is the assumption that, well, you're criticizing this government, President Mahama and his government. Is this problem their fault entirely?
One thing I've got to make clear is that I believe in saying the things that I believe in, and the day I stop speaking, the day probably I'm dead. But I hold the Parliament of Ghana totally and absolutely responsible for the situation in which we're in, because they have failed to provide proper oversight of the activities of government. And I'll tell you why. Whichever party's in power, whatever they do is right. So if MPP is in power, whatever MPP does is right. If NDC is in power, whatever they do is right. And because of that, they can't come together to take hard decisions. And they're focused on taking populist decisions. I'll give you an example. We all know, and everybody should know that in this country, we do not pay the appropriate tariffs for electricity. But no government is prepared to take the bold step to increase the tariffs, because the other side will use it against them. So what do we have? We have a situation where we can't pay our bills, so we don't have any lights. And you were talking about these barges, extra. I mean, it's just adding to the government debt. And no, none of the parties is able to take a decision, because they know that if, for example, they increase the tariffs, it will be used against them. Look at single spine. So I hold the Parliament of this country absolutely and totally responsible for the situation in which we're in. They're responsible.
Okay, we'll be exploring that a bit more, but I think we have Dr. John Kwakye on the line, senior economist for the IEA. Dr. Kwakye, hello again.
Hello.
Yes, slightly better, I think. So yes, you were explaining a point.
No, I said I didn't hear you well, but
okay.
Did you say that the government had put a moratorium on the debt?
Well, they announced a moratorium last year. They followed that with an announcement that from now on, all debts will be taken for projects that can pay back the debt. Akosombo is an example that is cited of a project for which they borrowed money, but of course the project has paid back that debt. So if that is the new direction, will that not perhaps mitigate this gloomy prediction that the IEA has made?
Of course, ideally, if we are using the loans, for projects, that will allow the economy to grow and therefore make the servicing of the debt in the future easier. That's always a good thing. But of course, we know that not all the loans are used for projects. In economics, we say that money is fungible. In the sense that you may, take the loan for a particular purpose, but sometimes, it's diverted. Some of it, is diverted for other purposes. These leakages are always very difficult to plug. So, for instance, your wage bill, subsidies and others, even you may borrow to help you pay the cost. Serving the cost of existing, loans and all that. So, but even having said that, we are still saying that the levels of borrowing are still high. Is it because you must still look at your debt level? No matter what you are using the loans for good purpose, but all the same, you cannot just ignore your debt level if it's getting into unsustainable, situations. That's exactly what we are warning. We have already crossed 60%, which most analysts consider to be the sustainable threshold. And we are saying that if we should go on at this same rate of borrowing, then we run the risk of going into unsustainability and possibly along the line going back into overburdened debt situation, and you can call it epic, or whatever. So all that we are cautioning is that we need to rein in the borrowing, and we need to go back to the budget to be able to do that, because it's the budget that drives the borrowing. You go to the expenditure side, the revenue side, and then, the deficit. That's exactly what we are saying.
Now, Dr. Kwakye, I'm conscious of the fact that every country borrows, for different reasons, and we have our own. And I'm wondering what the alternative is. I mean, it's clear that the coffers are bare. ECG wants to bring in some barges, and we are getting reports of an instruction to GNPC to provide the funding required to put up a surety for these barges to come in and operate. It is clear, if this is true, that funds are not available. How will a country like ours survive if we don't go to the loan market to shore up our cash requirements?
I think that is a different, aspect to what we're talking about. In other words, government is faced with immediate, problem on the energy sector and so on that they have to address. And in that case, they go for a special loan for that purpose. Well, that one, maybe it could be justified. But we are even talking about the public financial management in itself. That's what we are talking about. Not these specialized, loans that are taken because of an emergency. And then we are saying that if you say there's no alternative, if you go to the budget, and you try to manage the budget well, then of course you won't have to borrow at the rate that we borrow. And then that one, we can go into the details, because part of the message we have put out there is that we need to ensure budget discipline, fiscal discipline, and we have made suggestions to that in that regard. And so yes, I agree with you that there will be some borrowing, especially for emergency purposes, that could be justified. But we are talking about managing the public finances soundly, such that we avoid this cycle of borrowing, which escalates in election years. And then mind you, an election year is coming around next year. And that is why I want to sound these warnings even ahead of that.
Now, let's not also forget that the IMF is in town. This cycle of us running for help has come back full circle, and we're back with the IMF. Now, they always come along with conditionalities. This is what we saw in the 80s, and by and by, these conditionalities helped to straighten our fiscal crookedness, if you like. So, should we not be comforted by the presence of the IMF? Will that not sort of help us to maintain some level of discipline and avoid this gloomy prediction?
Yeah, of course, but we needn't even have gone to the IMF. We needn't, have gone to the IMF in the sense that we left the IMF in 2006, because we thought that we had got into, we were matured. We had matured. So you graduate out of the IMF. That's what most countries do. And we thought we had got there. Why did we have to go back to the IMF? This is because subsequently we didn't manage our affairs, well. I mean, our public financial management I'm talking about. And that is why we have had to return to the IMF. And then, of course, as you said, if you go to the IMF, it comes with conditionality. That is the way the IMF operates. In other words, they're going to help you with policy advice. And I must say that whenever you get into this situation, there's no alternative. You have to adjust. That's where we are. If you remember Greece and Spain and Portugal and the others that had to seek bailouts from their colleagues in the European Union, you will have to, they will demand that you adjust. You cannot continue to spend the way that you were doing it before. That got you into this trouble. And therefore, the IMF is certainly going to ask us to adjust. And the government seems to accept that. We have to adjust. So the IMF is coming to town, yes, certainly will help us to gain that kind of policy credibility that we have lacked, and then gain confidence of the donors. So that will help us to even bring resources. We are talking about resources. We need resources for everything, energy sector and so on. The donors are now holding back because they are not comfortable with the way we are managing the economy. So IMF will bring credibility and confidence and then a reflow of resources back into this economy to support the budget and then economic growth.